Okay, so a few months ago, I was up here talking about evangelism. Now, today's kind of sort of a follow-on from that. Now, I don't expect anybody to remember anything that I said, but just to summarise, right, the key takeaways from that we'll be building on a bit today are, regarding evangelism or sharing our faith, are number one, all of us have a part to play in that process of getting the good news of Jesus out there. Some people are very gifted at it and others are not so much, and I am in the not so much category. But we all have something we can do, and as we'll see in a minute, part of that, of what we can do, is be able and ready to give reasons or a defence for what we believe. All right? And the second thing is, most people's journey to finding Jesus it's incremental, many steps and influences along the way, and you could almost say there's a lot of gardeners before you get a harvest. So the harvest is usually done by the evangelists, and the gardening is done by the rest of us, but bit by bit along the way. But God uses all our little efforts along the way. Okay, so we're going to take a journey back in time to the early 2000s. Who remembers the early 2000s? Some people weren't born. Some people weren't born in the early 2000s. All right, so I am a young fellow at this point. I'm in my 20s. I've been in and around church since I was maybe about 10. So I've come through the difficult teenage years when a lot of people are drawn away from following Jesus for all sorts of reasons, but I'm still there. I'm hanging in there. I'm at a church I'm pretty committed to, been there for a while, all is going very well. Okay, so at the same time, the internet is starting to get going. Remember when there was no internet and then there was an internet? Oh, the world changed. The World Wide Web. It was an information superhighway. It was a very exciting time. So I had an internet plan at my house and it was a pretty high level one. So now everyone's got unlimited, and I think last month my household used about 1 or 2 terabytes, which is, sometimes there's 6 of us streaming all at once, so we use a lot. But in those days, I had, so 2 terabytes is, I think it's 2,000 gigabytes. At the time, in 2000, I had 3 gigabytes. And that was so much. It was loads. So after all the emails and MSN messaging and illegally downloading songs on LimeWire or Napster, right? By the end of the month, I usually had about 1 gigabyte left. Now, I'm paying for 3 gigabytes, so I'm using that gigabyte, right? There's no way I'm letting that go. So I stumble across this thing called internet radio. So at the time, people were, it's like podcasts now, but people were starting to put content up on their websites and so on. Now, I don't know how or why, but I stumble across these Christian ministries, lots of them in the USA, and they were getting in on internet radio. And then I discovered this thing called apologetics. And so this is people defending and talking about some of the tough parts of Christianity and the things we believe. There are people doing debates. There'd be does God exist? Debates between a Christian and an atheist. And I'd never heard anything like this. And then there were call-in shows where people could call in and ask their questions. And sometimes people who disagreed or had other beliefs would call in. And they'd talk it through, live on the radio. And I'm this is all very exciting because I'm just a guy who's grown up in a church, and you're in kind of a bubble there. You get a good variety of speakers, but that's kind of it. I mean, there was cassettes and stuff you could get of. Yeah, we're really going back into the old tech here, aren't we? You can play the cassettes on your Sony Walkman or whatever, but you're still in this little bubble. Anyway, so this internet thing opens up a whole new world where the beliefs that I'd just grown up with were suddenly being tested, and they were tested hard against some of the best ideas and arguments on the other side. And just generally, I was pleasantly surprised that our beliefs actually held up quite well. Now, internet radio has become podcasts now. But it was an exciting time for me, because I'm kind of working out, okay, does this ideas and these sort of religious beliefs that I've grown up with, do they actually stand up? Is there a foundation of truth, or are we just building on a whole lot of gaps and leaps of faith and hoping and wishing, or does it actually have a solid foundation? All right, now, sure, cassettes and 3 gigabytes are pretty high tech, but we're about to go to a new level, okay? Because in the early 2000s, here is what else I did. You could listen to the radio in your car, right? Still can, but I don't like the radio in the car. Too many ads. So here's what I came up with as cutting-edge technology. I would download the internet radio shows, right? My computer had a CD burner. So you go to JB Hi-Fi or Dick Smith, you get a huge stack of blank CDs, and you just burn them on it, and you play it in your car. It was incredible. What technology, what innovation. So I was podcasting years before podcasting even became a thing. I was just making it up. So anyway, all that to say, I've kind of been into apologetics and defending the faith for a very long time, and I still am. I've still got several podcasts, and one I discovered in the internet radio days that's still going. It's one of my favourites. It's called Stand to Reason. So if you're going on a walk or driving or whatever, it's got STR, Stand to Reason. One of my absolute faves. So in amongst my podcast feed of deep dives into NBA basketball and a lot of podcasts about the American TV show The Office. I've got a ridiculous... Anyway, my podcast feed's a bit weird, but I've got all these apologetics ones in there as well, because, yes. So, all right, so what we're going to talk about today is, why does any of this even matter? Why should we even care about the reasons and defences? Can't it just be all about faith, right? Can't we just believe, and if we're in doubt, we just believe harder and trust? Or what about love? Isn't it all about love? If we just love people, isn't that enough? And, faith certainly plays a big part, and love plays a big part, but knowing what we believe and why we believe it, very useful tool, as we'll hopefully see. All right, so the technical term for all of this is apologetics, which means defence. So what we're going to do today is, first of all, I'm going to provide an apologetic for apologetics. So I'm going to defend the need for defending the faith. Second, we'll look at, okay, that's fine, that's all fine, but how can it help us day to day? How can we even apply this in the real world? And if we've got time, I've got a couple of quick examples of some common objections you hear around the place in various forms to our beliefs and our worldview, and hopefully show that they're not that hard. Sometimes it's not that hard to refute. All right, so why would we need to bother defending our beliefs and go to the effort of thinking things through? Can't we just take it on faith? Can't we just know in our hearts that it's all real and that we just know because we just know? And can you even convince other people with reasons and arguments? Don't they just need to experience God's love or experience it for themselves, and then they'll know? Or we can just get them into church somehow, and then magically God will just do the rest. So, yep, all those things. All those things, like we said, the process for most people is multi-staged. So, yeah, all those things. But let's see what the Bible has to say about defending the faith. All right, so first verse. And this is a classic one. Everyone who is into apologetics or does it, or these ministries, this is pretty much the verse that the whole thing's built on. Can I have the first one? All right, 1 Peter 3, 15, 16. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience. All right, easy one. We are all to be prepared to give an answer, right? Or make a defence. Right? The Greek word is apologia, where you get the whole field apologetics from. Formal definition is a formal defence of an opinion, position, or action. So it's defensive. This is a defensive action we're doing. All right, next one, please, is exactly the same idea from Colossians. Be wise in the way you act towards outsiders, making the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. So we've got to know how to answer everyone as far as possible. All right, so same idea. We should be able to give answers. So if you're going to give answers, you've got to understand what the situation is, or what you believe, and more importantly, why you believe it. All right. So our belief system, and the worldview of Jesus, is built on a large number of truth claims, and he often gave evidence, as we'll see in a second. Now, one thing to notice what both of these have in common. In 1 Peter, it says, but do this with gentleness and respect. And our Colossians one here says, let your conversation always be full of grace. So our goal here, we don't want to be smarter than anyone or do a gotcha or get some zinger, like to win. The goal is friendly discussion and exchanges of ideas, ideally. So we're not monologuing at people here. We're doing it with grace and with gentleness and respect. All right, here's another one. Please, Titus 1:9. Now this is in Titus as a part of a checklist for pastors, basically. But it's a useful thing for all of us. Now, the language in this, I reckon, is slightly more aggressive. So it's so for the pastors, he must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. So that's pretty strong to me. So even within the church, and like, not ours necessarily, but the broader church, all sorts of new and wild ideas come along. So sometimes you have to defend even the basics. So that's the sound doctrine part, right? But you've got to know what your sound doctrine is to start with, and then on top of that, helps to know how to defend it, right? So we've got to be equipped to refute any opposition. Oh, okay, you think, but nobody was ever argued into the kingdom, right? You can't argue people in, and sometimes you hear that as a reason why none of this matters, right? And there are schools of thought around even now that it's other things that win people over, like it's signs and wonders and miracles, or if we just love each other and accepting and are welcoming. And sure, yep, Jesus said that they'll know you by your love for one another, right? And then they'll see the love of Jesus and be won over, and that's all we need. So you can't find your way through your intellect. It's all through the heart, right? People have just got to experience it. Yep, well, again, all of those things, and more. So God, by His Spirit, is doing the work, and He changes the hearts, but He does that through very many and varied ways. And for lots of people, it's all of those ways and more. So can't all these things be working together? Right? So, we can pray and ask God to do miraculous things and save miraculous people and save people miraculously and give signs. And we've definitely got to love people, right? We've got to be loving and welcoming and accepting. So, because without love, if we know our stuff, but we're not very loving, like people might say, yeah, look, these people seem pretty sure of their convictions, but they're not. They're all jerks. They're not very nice. I don't want to hang around in this club. Right? But if we don't have good reasons, right, people might say, well, it's nice here, it feels good. I feel very, very accepted and welcomed and loved, but they don't really know what they're talking about, do they? They don't really have many good reasons for what they believe. They seem to just believe these things out of nowhere. All right? So can't it be both? Can't it be both and more? So the process of people coming to Jesus is multi-staged, and for a lot of people, breaking down the logic and the reason barriers is a big part of it. So it certainly was for me. But don't take it from me. What do I know? So let's go to our Bibles, because if if you're not supposed to use reasons and arguments, then Jesus and the apostles clearly didn't get that memo, right? So let's have a look at a couple of things that they actually did. So Acts 18, please, Kira. Okay, so this is the early church spread out. They're all doing their thing. Okay, so Apollos wants to go to Achaia, right? The brothers and sisters encouraging him, wrote to the disciples there welcoming him. When he arrived, he was a great help to those who by grace had believed, for he vigorously refuted his Jewish opponents in public debate, proving from the scriptures that Jesus was the Messiah. So this guy is having public debates, and he's pulling out the Old Testament scriptures, and he's saying, here is my reasoned argument why Jesus was the Messiah, right? So there you go, reasons. Next one, Acts 19. So this was Paul's thing. He'd go from town to town and enter the synagogue. He'd go to the synagogue, like get a speaking gig there on a Sunday, or Saturday rather, because they're Jews. So this is what he did. So Paul entered the synagogue and spoke boldly there for 3 months, arguing persuasively about the kingdom of God. For some of them became obstinate. They refused to believe and publicly maligned the way. So that'll happen. That'll happen to us. So Paul left them. He took the disciples with him and had daily discussions in the lecture hall of Tyrannus. This went on for 2 years. 2 years he's there having daily discussions. And what happened? All the Jews and Greeks who lived in the province of Asia heard the word of the Lord. So he's there giving his reasons, saying, people are coming to him going, yeah, but what about this, what about that? He's like, yep, okay, let's talk about that. 2 years the guy's there doing this, all right? This was one of the major strategies of the apostles, to have public discussions and debates. Now, luckily for them, the culture was, people loved that back in those days. People aren't so much into that these days, but like there was a whole culture in those days where people really loved throwing back and forward ideas. So, it's a bit harder for us now, but the principle's there, is that they were using reasons and making line-by-line arguments, basically, for their beliefs. All right? Okay, what about Jesus? Did Jesus do this? Well, sometimes, you know how Jesus would get stuck into people and say, like, ye of little faith, right? So that was not because they didn't just close their eyes and believe and say, oh yeah, okay, I guess if you said it, Jesus, then we'll just take that, right? It was because he'd given them so much evidence and they still refused to believe. He'd call people hard-hearted, which was because they had so many reasons to believe, but they still refused, right? Hard-heartedness. So, and he had no problem giving reasons. He also would point to the Old Testament scriptures all the time and say, look, I'm clearly the guy they're talking about here. Look what I'm doing, right? So it was their hard hearts. So lots of times he laid out evidence or built a case, right? So for example, right, in Luke, John the Baptist sends his followers to Jesus and they say, are you the one who is to come or should we expect someone else, right? Now, at the time, Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses and evil spirits and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, go back and report to John what you have seen or heard. So he's essentially saying there, look at the evidence. Like, look at what I've done here. Right? The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear. So he's basically saying, you know what the Messiah is supposed to look like. Right? Here is evidence that I am him. What do you go? It's obvious, right? There you go. So put 2 and 2 together, John the Baptist and your disciples. So he's not saying, yeah, I said so just believe me. He's saying, here's the evidence for it, all right? So, all right, so yeah, he's saying, mate, you know what the Messiah is supposed to be, and I'm clearly it, so figure it out. All right, now, after he's resurrected, he appears to Thomas, right? So, doubting Thomas. And so the Bible says that the first time he appeared, Thomas wasn't with him. I don't know what he was doing. Doesn't say what he was doing. And so Thomas says, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where the nails were, I will not believe. All right? So then Jesus appears again a bit later, and he says, he doesn't say to Thomas, right, mate, you should have just believed because people told you, right? Because I'm on Thomas's side here. This is a high bar, right? My mates are saying, oh, our boss died, but he came back from the dead, right? I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'm not really going to take it on your say-so. So Jesus appears again and says, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hands and put it in my side, stop doubting and believe. So Jesus is saying, I'm right here, here's the evidence, I'm here and I got holes in me. What more do you need? What more do you need? And at that point, Thomas says, yeah, I'm in. So again, giving reasoned arguments. All right, so that is all very nice. And hopefully we have shown there that the modus operandi of Jesus and his apostles was quite often to give reasoned arguments. All right? Now, that's all very nice, but how is this useful to you and me? And how can this work out in everyday life? Right? So I think there are two main ways that this can work out. So knowing what we believe and why we believe is a great tool out there in the real world with evangelism, or when spiritual things come up, or when people ask you, why do you go to church, or something about church. Right? You don't all need a degree in theology, right? Remember the scripture that apologetics rests on, right? Which is just be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks, right? We're not giving 20-minute monologues every time someone asks us a question or has an objection. We just got to be able and confident to have friendly discussions, okay? And confidence is the main thing, right? If you're confident that your worldview is defensible and correct, and you know a couple of things, you're gonna go into discussions kind of confident, you know? Okay, now the key here is, what is our job here? It's to give a defence with gentleness and reverence. So, we are not badgering people, right? We're not annoying people so much that they walk away. We're not hassling them until they avoid ever wanting to see you again. Because most likely, people are not going to be persuaded by what we tell them, but that's fine, right? We're not shouting at people because they refuse to agree with us. In fact, it's very unlikely they will on the spot. We're not trying to win arguments. So we're not trying to be cleverer than anyone else. Here's what we are doing, right? We're not trying to be the winner, right? If you walk away and think, yes, I won that one, well, you've probably done it wrong. You've probably done it wrong because you haven't got your idea across. You've just crushed somebody, right? So hopefully we learn as much about the other person's beliefs as we do in expressing our own, because that's how it should be with a back and forward. All right, now the other thing is, we're not trying to get an instant conversion, right? This almost never happens. All right, so here's a very useful metaphor for what I'm trying to do, what we're trying to do is you know when you get just a little rock in your shoe, or your sock turns the wrong way, right? And it's just super annoying, right? You walk in, you can't think of anything else because it's just really bothering you. So that is pretty much what we're trying to do. We are trying to put a stone in people's shoe where you just seed an idea, right? And then they kind of I kind of can't get away from that, from that idea, or from that argument, or from the reasons that they gave me. So that's really the goal. It's a very humble goal, right? That's what we're trying to do. Just trying to give people think that are hard to dismiss or hard to shake off, right? We're leaving a stone in their shoe. Okay, so here's a couple of examples that actually happened to me. Okay, so now I did okay in both of these. We all mess up the opportunities that we get often, but anyway. So spoiler alert, though. The goal is to leave a stone, so there's no miraculous conversion at the end of this, right? So okay, so first of all, years ago I worked with this guy, and his in-laws were quite into the word of faith and faith healing and all that sort of thing. So Benny Hinn types, right? Actually, not only Benny Hinn types, they were into Benny Hinn himself. okay, and he was in town doing rallies or something. So my friend from work, he knows I'm a church guy, so he says to me, what do you reckon about faith healing, right? He says, my in-laws are pretty into it, but it seems kind of fake. All right, so I think, okay, great, opportunity. So I start with a question and I say, well, what do your in-laws say about it and what do you reckon? Which, by the way, is always the best strategy to start with, is to get more clarity on the other person's views. Okay, so he says that, the in-laws seem to think it's all great, it just looks like a whole lot of hype, and maybe they're just collecting money, right? So I think to myself, okay, what is the underlying objection here, right? So the underlying objection is, I am turned off Christianity because of some of its proponents that make it look like a bit of a circus, right? That don't represent it probably quite as well as they ought to. So I think, all right, well, my goal here is to I don't have to defend, Benny Hinn or whatever. I'm here to defend the Christian worldview. So here is my response, right? I say, well, I'm not sure about Benny Hinn. It does seem like a bit of a circus, right? And, maybe it's real, maybe it's not. I don't really know. But, however, if there is a God who created the whole universe, then healing someone is something he could pretty easily do if he wanted to do, okay? And there probably are, there are definitely, fakers around. However, in normal everyday churches, you kind of see some pretty miraculous things sometimes, and I have. So, that's I don't know if it's happening at these big rallies, but definitely happens like at ground level. All right, so you see my answer there is I'm not going into the issue of I don't have to defend every part of Christianity or every expression of it. All I've really done is I've defended the consistency of the Christian worldview, which is there's a God and he created the universe and he can do miraculous things, right? That's it. That's all I could get across in that one, and that is fine, because that's all I want to do. Just want to put a little stone in the shoe, all right? So here's another one, right? So one time I'm working at this place, and there's a lady, a different place, and there's a lady there very into sort of, New Age spirituality. She's a naturopath and a something or other path, all those, right? So she's very into... Yeah, I think they're all great, by the way. I'm not mocking them. But, yeah, she's sort of one of those extremely spiritual, people. So sometimes I would ask her about, her ideas and beliefs. And so one day she says to me, Brad, what is it about Christianity that you like? What about it appeals to you? All right? So straight away, I recognise what is her underlying claim here, right? The claim here is that religions or spiritual beliefs are just a matter of taste, right? They're a matter of preference. We hold them because we like them or because they do something for us, right? It doesn't matter whether they're actually true or not. It's just, are they useful, right? And that is not Jesus' view. Jesus' view was, I am saying these things and they are correct, right? And the opposite is therefore not correct, all right? So, but I'm going to give a gentle defence. So I say something like, well, it's not really like that, right? I'm mainly into Christianity because I think it's true. And I think the things Jesus said and did and claimed are correct. And, in fact, I think Jesus actually, in reality, came to earth and died on a cross to forgive our sins, right? So there you go. So I'm trying to say, Christianity is not a preference thing, it's a truth thing, all right? So she says, right, well, I think all religions are beautiful and true and have something valuable to offer, all right? And this is quite a common thing you'll find out there, where people are trying to take the neutral ground when it comes to religious beliefs, right? I'll say, well, they're all great, aren't they? I mean, after all, they have so much in common, right? And they do to some extent, but it's the differences that really matter, all right? So that is her claim. All right. Now, she thinks she's taken the neutral ground, but she's actually made a truth claim, right? So she said all religions, or essentially all religions lead to the same place, or lead to the divine, or lead to God. Now, it doesn't sound like a truth claim, but it is. It is, because if you don't think that's correct, then you're wrong, right? I.e., my belief that Jesus is the only way is wrong, okay? So, but I'm not going to phrase it like that, because that's a bit argumentative, okay? So, okay, and also it seems obvious to me that all religions can't be correct because they claim completely opposite things, right? So it just seems obvious to me. All right, so so even in just this example, I'm saying Jesus is the only way, she's saying always, so we can't both be right. She could be right and I could be wrong, but we can't both be right. Okay, so what I said next was probably not the best, but I had heard a similar exchange on one of my car CDs, right? So I say, oh, all religions, really? What about Islamic fundamentalism, like the religious group that flew the planes on September 11? Okay, so not all of that entire religion, but that particular group, right? So it's a terrible example I used, right? I should have said Scientology or something, right? Something kind of obvious, or Satanism, right? And I should have said something else, but the point being, if, like, her view, I'm just trying to gently say, your view doesn't really quite go through in reality, right? So, there are obviously religious groups that are holding damaging and untrue beliefs, and pretty much everyone except them would agree. Okay, so not the best argument, but luckily she was not an easily offended person, so she was quite nice. And she actually said to me, you know what, Brad, that's a very good point. I'm going to ask a few of my shamans about that. So, so there you go. But I was satisfied that I'd made an okay defence and I got the point across. Number one, that the worldview of Jesus isn't just a nice preference, right? We're saying that it actually is true. And secondly, that the idea that all religions are equally valid doesn't really quite go through in the real world. All right, so here is the second real-world application of knowing what we believe and why we believe it. All right? So if you've been in and around this thing for any time at all, you know that every one of us has times when the circumstances of life will knock us about and maybe we think, where is God in all this? Or is it even all real? Or for pretty much everyone, at some point, you're going to have questions or doubts about your faith and about some of the beliefs that we hold, right? Maybe some ideas you come across out there or some objections out in the world sound pretty convincing. I mean, like even on Instagram, like sometimes it throws up to me, the algorithm throws up to me, people giving like counter arguments for Christianity. So they're everywhere. They're everywhere these days, right? The social medias are full of people. And there's people who've left Christianity or deconstructed and all that. And they love it. They love throwing up their objections. All right, so maybe if you're like a teenager or a bit older and you come to a point where you think, am I only in this because I grew up in it or because my parents believed it? Did I just happen to stumble across this religion when I was young and I've just never really thought it through? And so, by the way, thinking these things through and dealing with doubts and things we don't understand, just fine. Actually, we should be exploring and asking questions. And like as a church or as parents or whatever, we should definitely not be afraid or let it trouble us, because whatever objections I've got or anyone's got, I am very unlikely to be the first person who's wrestled with it. And there are great answers. There are fantastic answers out there. So we really don't need to be afraid. In the book of Jude, right, which is only 25 verses long, there's this one phrase that has no context before or after it. It simply says, "Be merciful to those who doubt." So if you have any doubts, you're in a great place. We are in this church, very merciful to those who doubt. We're well aware that everyone is on different stages of their journey, and we're going to give you lots of room to work things out. And no one ever perfects it. Like, doubts are not exclusive to any age or stage. But what is a great solution to your doubts? Is it burying it, or having more blind faith, or just believing harder, or blocking your ears and not listening to the outside voices? No, it's getting reassurance and seeking answers, right? And that's what I was doing when I was burning my CDs, right? I'm trying to work out, is this actually true? Can I put my faith and trust in this for the rest of my life? Should I order my life around this, right? So this is another amazing benefit of being able to give a defense. Sometimes you're defending the faith against yourself and your own doubts, right? So when times are tough and you're uncertain, we usually come back to two things. Well, I do anyway, all right? So you come back to, what do I know for sure, like in my head? What can't I get past? And what experiences do I have that I can't deny, right? So for me personally, right, the base level for me is I am completely convinced that God exists, right? That I could never be an atheist, right? There are all these formal arguments for the existence of God, right? There's one called the Kalam cosmological argument, and there's a moral argument, and there's ones from teleology and intelligent design. There's multiple lines of reasoning that I just can't get past. I'm not going into them all today, right? They're very long, but I can't get past them, right? And then just the historical facts about Jesus of Nazareth, right? That he came, existed, died on a Roman cross, and was seen by hundreds of witnesses after who, in the course of the next few decades, gave their life for that belief, pretty much without exception. Right? No, almost none of them went, oh yeah, no, I made it up, right? So those sort of things I can't get past. So no matter how low my belief level or my faith level gets, I will never be able to get away from those things, all right? Or maybe you've got an experience that you can't deny, right? Maybe it's a miraculous change in your life, like who you were and who you are now is just so different, right? Because of Jesus. Or maybe you've seen so many miraculous things and you just can't explain it any other way. So yeah, when we doubt, we all got to come back to a baseline. And that's where I think apologetics and defense can help. When we're blown about by all sorts of things, you don't just have to believe harder or pray more or bury it. We have something solid. We have a firm defense and reasons for what we believe. We've got a foundation to come back to. All right, so in conclusion, maybe we've all got to do a little bit of homework and be prepared to make the most of the opportunities we get. But we're always going to be nice and gentle. Always, always. Some of the debates you see, like that, I think they're a little bit mean, right? I mean, it is a confrontational situation, but like these formal debates, they're useful for getting the ideas out there. But in reality, we have to be much more lovely and conversational. And like I said before, we're just as interested in the other person's beliefs and how they got there as we are about getting our ideas across. All right? Then we trust God's Spirit to do what only He can do, and that is to change hearts. We can't change hearts. We can love people, we can give reasons, we can do all of that, but it is the God's Spirit that changes hearts. Our job is to put stones in people's shoes. So then the Holy Spirit goes to work. All right? Do we all sometimes have doubts? Yes, all of us do. I mean, I do find I have less as time goes on, because, I've resolved a lot of things over time. But we can always come back to what we know for sure. All right? The experiences, but also the reasoning we can't get away with. So let's always be ready to give an apologia for the hope that is within us. Done. All right.